Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a time in every man's life when he is forced to face a truth he can no longer run from. A truth that whispers to him in the quiet hours, in the mirror's reflection, in the weight of missed opportunities and roads not taken. The tragedy is not that men fail, it is that they delay learning the lessons that could have spared them the cost of wasted years. Today, I do not come to entertain. I come to awaken, because every man walking this earth is carrying greatness inside of him, but most are waiting for permission, for a perfect moment, or for a second chance that may never come. What I've learned through the lives of successful men and through my own failures is that time is the most ruthless teacher. It gives the test first and the lesson afterward. But if you are willing to listen now, truly listen, you can bypass the pain of regret and rise with purpose. Success begins the moment a man stops blaming others and takes full ownership of his life. This truth may sound simple on the surface, but it is one of the most difficult shifts a man can ever make. From childhood, many of us are conditioned to point the finger outward. If something goes wrong, it must be someone else's fault. The teacher didn't like me, my parents didn't support me, the economy isn't fair, my boss is toxic, the system is broken, and while all of these may contain fragments of truth, the man who continues to hand over responsibility will never gain the power to change his situation. Ownership is not about guilt, it is not about blame, it is about control. It is about reclaiming the steering wheel of your own life and saying, from this point forward, I am responsible for what happens next. Men who rise in life are men who learn this lesson early. They begin to understand that they cannot wait for ideal conditions. They stop hoping the world will become easier and instead choose to become stronger. They do not ask for fairness. They work for mastery. They recognize that pain is a part of progress and that setbacks are not signals to quit but invitations to grow. When a man takes ownership, he begins to see failure as feedback. He stops fearing mistakes because each one becomes a lesson that shapes his next move. The victim mindset is seductive. It whispers lies that make us feel safe. It tells us we are not at fault, so we do not need to change. It tells us someone else should fix it so we can wait. But this comfort is an illusion, and it comes at a cost. That cost is your potential. That cost is your future. That cost is your time. Taking ownership requires courage. It means admitting that we have made choices, conscious or unconscious, that led us to where we are. It means facing the consequences of those choices without excuses. It means standing in the mirror and saying, if I am not where I want to be, then it is up to me to change. This is not an easy conversation to have with yourself. It requires humility, and it requires the willingness to be uncomfortable. But this is also the very moment when life begins to shift. Responsibility is the gatekeeper to freedom. The more a man blames others, the more he chains himself to a life he doesn't want. But the moment he says, I will own this, he breaks free. You can tell a man's future by the way he responds to adversity. The man who blames will stay stuck. The man who takes responsibility will build. He will find a way where there is none. He will stop waiting for help and start becoming the help he needs. Life does not reward the complainers. It rewards the doers. It rewards the builders. It rewards the man who says, this is hard, but I am harder. Blame is easy. It's cheap. It feels good in the moment, but it keeps a man powerless. Ownership, on the other hand, is expensive. It costs your pride, it costs your comfort, but it buys you progress, it buys you growth, it buys you a future you can be proud of. Think of any man who has achieved something remarkable, whether in business, in personal transformation, in relationships, or in leadership. None of them got there by pointing fingers. They got there by asking themselves one powerful question. What can I do differently? That question changes lives. It shifts your focus from what's wrong to what you can do about it. It moves you from being reactive to being proactive. It puts you in the driver's seat of your destiny. Because the man who takes ownership stops living by chance and starts living by choice. There will always be things beyond your control. That is life. But the strongest men are those who take full command over the things they can control. Their habits, their attitude, their reactions, their discipline, their mindset, their effort. Ownership turns a man from a passive observer into an active creator. He no longer waits for permission to act. He gives himself the green light. He no longer needs external validation. He builds internal standards. And once he does that, no challenge can break him completely, because he has already decided that no matter what happens, he is responsible for his next move. Time wasted on things that do not matter is the most expensive debt a man will ever pay. Most men underestimate the weight of time until they feel it slipping through their fingers. In youth, time feels abundant. There is always another chance, another year, another tomorrow. But every hour spent in distraction, every day wasted in comfort, every year passed without intention, slowly compounds into a quiet debt that eventually demands payment. And the payment is regret. Regret is the bitter interest of time misused. And it does not come all at once. It sneaks in gradually, like a shadow that grows with every missed opportunity, every ignored dream, every excuse dressed in the clothing of good intentions. The truth most men refuse to face is this: the cost of wasted time is not just missed productivity, it's missed transformation. Every hour you scroll mindlessly, every night you spend numbing yourself with distractions, every year you spend in a job you hate or a life you never chose is time you will never get back. Unlike money, time cannot be earned again. It cannot be saved for later. Once it's gone for good. And while the world may not hold you accountable, your soul will. Your future self will. There will come a day when you will look back and wish you had done more with less, when the energy was there, when the fire still burned, when you had fewer responsibilities and more freedom to shape your path. What steals a man's time the most is not always laziness. It's distraction disguised as progress. It's the illusion of productivity. It's being busy without being effective. It's chasing approval instead of results. It's filling your days with noise so you don't have to face the silence of your unfulfilled potential. Men who learned this lesson too late realized they were running fast in the wrong direction. They climbed ladders only to find they were leaning against the wrong walls. They chased comfort and sacrificed growth. They pursued acceptance and lost authenticity. It is not enough to be active. You must be aligned. You must know what matters and build your life around it. Most men do not lack time. They lack clarity. They don't know what they want, so they give their time away to whatever asks first. The news, social media, pointless arguments, shallow relationships, jobs they hate, escapes they can't even enjoy. And then they wonder why their lives feel hollow. A man who does not protect his time is a man who has already surrendered his potential. Discipline with time is not about squeezing every second into work. It's about choosing what deserves your attention and cutting out what doesn't. It's about saying no without guilt. It's about recognizing that you were not put here to be entertained. You were put here to evolve. Every hour is a seed, and the question is not whether you are planting, but what you are growing. Are you building something meaningful, or are you just passing time and calling it life? Are you choosing growth, or are you choosing the easy path that leads nowhere new? A man who values his time starts to live differently. He stops surrounding himself with people who waste his energy. He stops engaging in conversations that don't challenge him. He stops tolerating mediocrity in his habits, in his thinking, and in his goals. He starts treating his days as the currency of his destiny. Every morning becomes a choice. Every evening becomes a reflection. And each decision becomes a brick in the foundation of the life he's building. You do not need more time. You need more focus, more clarity, more courage to cut away the unnecessary and make room for what truly matters. Your purpose doesn't live in some distant future. It lives in how you use the next hour, the next day, the next decision. Wasting time is not a momentary error, it's a habit. And over time, it becomes a mindset. The mindset of later, of someday, of when I'm ready. But life doesn't wait. Opportunity doesn't knock forever. Growth doesn't happen by default. It happens when you decide to stop trading what you want most for what's easy now. A man who treats time like a gift becomes dangerous to everything that tries to hold him back. He becomes immune to distraction. He stops chasing validation. He starts building discipline like armor. He learns to say no to things that look good but aren't right. He understands that focus is freedom and intention is power. And he carries himself with the weight of someone who knows that wasted time is the one bill that can never be paid off. A man's true strength is measured not in how loud he speaks, but in how disciplined he lives. In a world where noise is often mistaken for influence and bravado confused with leadership, many men chase the illusion of strength while ignoring the quiet foundations it's built upon. Discipline is the silent force behind all meaningful achievement. It is not flashy. It does not demand attention. It shows up early, stays late, and makes sacrifices while others seek comfort. The strongest man in the room is often the one who speaks the least and does the most. His confidence is not in his volume, but in his consistency. He does not need to prove anything because his results speak louder than words ever could. Discipline is the backbone of all greatness. It's the invisible thread that weaves through every successful man's story. You see it in the man who rises before the sun to train his body and sharpen his mind. In the father who shows up daily for his children, not just with presence, but with purpose. In the entrepreneur who continues to build after 10 failures because he is married to the process, not just the outcome. These men don't just have motivation, they have structure. They have routines that anchor them, habits that elevate them, and values that guide them even when no one is watching. Discipline is doing what needs to be done, even when you don't feel like doing it, especially then. In contrast, men who seek to be seen rather than to grow often burn out quickly. They rely on bursts of energy, on emotional highs, on temporary excitement. But when the pressure comes, and it always does, they crumble because they never built the internal framework required to carry real weight. Loud voices rarely lead lasting legacies. True leaders do not need applause to stay committed. They are loyal to their purpose, not to public approval. The louder the noise around them, the more they retreat inward and return to their core. Discipline gives them that grounding. It protects them from distraction, from ego, from self-sabotage. Strength is forged in the choices no one sees, in the hours spent reading when others are binge-watching, in the decision to say no to temptation because a greater goal is at stake, in waking up on time, keeping promises, setting boundaries, and showing up for yourself even when the world isn't watching. That's the strength most people never talk about. Not how much weight you can lift, but how much truth you can carry. Not how fast you rise, but how long you can endure. Discipline teaches you how to suffer well, how to keep going when it's not fun, and how to remain steady in a world addicted to instant gratification. Every man will face moments when quitting seems easier, when compromise feels tempting, when shortcuts sparkle like salvation. And in those moments, the man with discipline doesn't need to think. His habits speak for him. His structure guides him. He doesn't ask whether he feels like it. He simply shows up because that's what he's trained himself to do. He understands that feelings are temporary, but discipline is a decision, and that decision must be made again and again every single day, often without applause, often without recognition. But over time, discipline becomes your identity. It shapes your character. It separates the boys from the men, the dabblers from the dedicated, the dreamers from the doers. Men who lack discipline often find themselves drifting, not because they're incapable, but because they're unanchored. They chase novelty, distractions, validation, hoping to feel whole for a moment, only to return to the same sense of emptiness. But discipline fills that void with something deeper: direction, purpose, strength. A disciplined man doesn't need to scream to be heard. He doesn't need to flex to be respected. His life, his choices, and his results do the talking. He knows that storms will come, critics will rise, and seasons will change, but his principles will remain. And that is what gives him power that can't be taken, broken, or borrowed. The world needs more men who lead by example, not ego, who choose to be stable rather than spectacular, who build slow and steady, brick by brick, day by day, who know that discipline is not about being perfect, it's about being faithful. Faithful to the path, faithful to the mission, faithful to the man you said you would become. When a man embraces discipline, he becomes unshakable, not because life gets easier, but because he becomes stronger. He stops being reactive and starts being intentional. He stops chasing highs and starts building legacy, because he understands that real strength was never about being loud. It was always about being consistent. The people you surround yourself with are either sharpening your future or slowly dulling it without you even realizing. Most men underestimate how deeply the energy around them affects the direction of their lives. It's not just about obvious negativity or toxicity. Sometimes it's about subtle mediocrity, low ambition, and unspoken envy. You become like the people you spend the most time with, not through conscious imitation, but through quiet absorption. Their thoughts shape your thinking, their habits rub off on your routine, their limits define your ceiling. What they normalize, you start to accept. What they laugh at, you start to dismiss. What they ignore, you stop chasing. This is why being intentional with your circle is not optional, it's essential. A man who wants to rise must surround himself with men who are already climbing. Comfort comes from being the smartest or strongest in the room, but growth comes from being the most uncomfortable, from sitting next to people who challenge your excuses, who hold you accountable, who inspire you simply by the way they live. If you're the most driven person in your group, your growth will slow. You'll begin to plateau without even noticing. Your standards will quietly drop. Your hunger will dull, your edge will fade. But when you're around others who are stretching themselves, who are reaching higher, who are building something greater than themselves, you're forced to elevate just to keep up. Most men waste years stuck in environments that no longer serve them. Old friends, shallow conversations, repetitive habits, energy-draining dynamics. They feel the weight of stagnation, but blame it on circumstances instead of examining their circle. You can't plant the seed of a powerful life in soil that's poisoned with complacency. Your dreams need fertile ground, discipline, inspiration, momentum, support. Without that, even the most passionate vision will eventually wither. The wrong people don't always discourage you directly. Sometimes they just never push you, never ask more of you, never reflect back the fire you're trying to carry. Sometimes it's not about cutting people off. It's about limiting access, protecting your peace, guarding your focus, redefining your boundaries without apology. A man who values his future will not hesitate to distance himself from anyone or anything that threatens it. He understands that loyalty to the past must never outweigh responsibility to the future. You can love someone from a distance. You can respect history without sacrificing destiny. Choosing yourself is not betrayal. It's alignment. It's realizing that not everyone can go where you're going, and that's okay. But if you insist on dragging them with you, you'll slow yourself down or lose your way entirely. Elevation demands separation, and separation requires courage. The courage to walk alone for a season, the courage to be misunderstood, the courage to feel isolated while you build something better. There is a loneliness that comes with growth, but there is also clarity, strength, and focus. When the noise dies down, your voice becomes clearer. When the distractions fade, your path becomes sharper. The man who dares to prune his environment is the man who starts to flourish. He starts attracting the right people, those who see his vision, who respect his grind, who bring value instead of drama, who remind him of what he's capable of when he starts to forget. Your circle should not only support your potential, but stretch it. The conversations you have daily should not revolve around gossip, complaints, or the past. They should be focused on ideas, solutions, and the future. If your environment is not feeding your ambition, it's starving it. Every moment you spend in low-frequency circles chips away at your hunger, your momentum, your discipline. It teaches you to settle. It makes extraordinary feel excessive. It convinces you that dreaming bigger is unrealistic, but when you're around men with vision, with fire, with focus, you remember who you are. You remember what you were made for. It's not about elitism, it's about alignment. Not about judgment, but stewardship. You only get one shot at this life, and who you allow to influence you will determine whether you rise, fall, or stay stuck. Surround yourself with men who are honest, not just supportive, who challenge your blind spots, not just your enemy, who push you to be more, not just celebrate who you were. The wrong circle will drown your potential in praise. The right one will demand your evolution. They'll remind you of your standards when you start lowering them. They'll call out the greatness in you when you forget it's there. They'll hold you to a higher level, not because they think they're better, but because they know you are capable of more than you realize. There comes a point in every man's life when he realizes that no one is coming to save him. No mentor, no friend, no woman, no opportunity will magically appear and fix the chaos he's quietly drowning in. The world doesn't owe him a rescue plan, and the longer he waits for one, the deeper he sinks into frustration and helplessness. This is a hard truth that many men resist, but it's also the beginning of transformation. Because once a man stops waiting for permission, for validation, for perfect timing, he finally becomes dangerous in the best possible way. He becomes the type of man who builds without applause, who heals without attention, who rises without noise. Taking responsibility is not about blame, it's about power. It's the shift from victimhood to ownership, from complaining to creating, from reacting to leading. When a man owns his life, he stops making excuses for his habits, his results, and his environment. He no longer points fingers at the past, his parents, the economy, or fate. He understands that while those things may have shaped him, they do not define him. His response is his responsibility. His discipline is his weapon. His choices are his architects. He starts building from where he is, not where he wishes he was. And that shift, though subtle, is everything. Men who wait for someone else to fix their problems never truly grow. They build dependency instead of strength. They become addicted to advice, praise, and sympathy, none of which develop resilience. But the man who looks himself in the mirror and says, "This is on me," unlocks a different level of freedom. He stops outsourcing his happiness and starts engineering it. He stops chasing comfort and starts choosing growth. He stops blaming lack of support and starts becoming his own support. And in doing so, he becomes the man people eventually admire, but only because he first chose to stand alone. It's not that help is bad. It's that relying on help as your strategy is weak. No one respects a man who always needs a lifeline. People are drawn to those who lead themselves. The man who disciplines his mind, controls his emotions, manages his habits, and sharpens his skills becomes unstoppable, not because he has no flaws, but because he refuses to be ruled by them. Self-leadership is the rarest form of leadership, and yet the most necessary. You can't lead a family, a business, or a mission if you can't first lead yourself. And that starts with taking full, brutal, radical responsibility for everything in your life, especially the things you could change but haven't. There's a moment in every man's journey where he feels overwhelmed. Nothing is going right. He's losing ground. The weight feels unbearable. And that's the exact moment most look for an escape, a distraction, a shortcut. But the ones who rise are the ones who dig in, who say, "I may not have created all of this, but I will be the one who ends it." That mindset is rare. It's not taught in schools or celebrated in pop culture, but it's the foundation of every man who refuses to die with regret. Responsibility is not sexy. It doesn't go viral, but it builds men who don't break when life punches them in the mouth. It's easy to find reasons to quit, to say it's not fair, to explain why you're stuck. But explanations don't change outcomes. Ownership does. Accountability does. Most men don't fail because they lack talent. They fail because they lack resolve. The ability to look at the mess and say, "This will not be the end of me. I will clean it up. I will rise. I will rebuild." That doesn't mean it will be quick or easy. It means it will be yours. And that's where real strength begins. Not in having everything, but in owning everything. Once a man starts leading himself, everything shifts. His body changes because he respects it. His mindset evolves because he feeds it. His income grows because he becomes valuable. His relationships improve because he becomes intentional. His reputation sharpens because he becomes consistent. This doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen perfectly, but it begins the moment he stops waiting for someone else to save him. When a man accepts full responsibility, he becomes impossible to manipulate, impossible to derail, and impossible to defeat for long. Pain becomes a teacher, not a jailer. Pressure becomes fuel, not an excuse. Challenges become invitations to level up, not reasons to give up. Most men want change, but few want to change. They want different results with the same habits, the same circle, the same mindset. But that's not how life works. Life responds to the man who takes charge, who doesn't just hope for better days, but builds them, who doesn't just post about discipline, but lives it, who doesn't just talk about purpose, but aligns every action with it. That man may not be loud, but he is respected. He may not be flashy, but he is remembered. Because when you lead yourself, you don't need anyone's permission to rise. You just do it. Every man eventually comes to a moment in his life when he realizes that pleasing everyone is a trap disguised as virtue. At first it feels noble, being liked, being agreeable, never stirring the waters too much. It earns you quick approval, smiles, applause from people who don't know your truth, but that approval is rented, not owned. It shifts the moment you set boundaries, the moment you speak your truth, the moment you stop living to make others comfortable. And when you finally wake up to that, you realize how much of your energy has been spent trying to be what others expected instead of who you were born to be. You realize that trying to please everyone made you invisible to yourself. The truth is, people-pleasing is not kindness, it's self-abandonment. It's betraying your needs, your standards, your truth just to avoid conflict or rejection. It's choosing short-term peace at the cost of long-term resentment. And that resentment grows quietly like rust on the inside. You smile on the outside, but your spirit knows it's being compromised. You nod in agreement while your soul screams in silence. You give when you're depleted, say yes when you mean no, and then wonder why you feel so hollow and exhausted. It's because every time you deny your truth to be accepted, you lose a part of yourself. Not all at once, but slowly, piece by piece. You can't become who you're meant to be while constantly trying to fit into the image others have created for you. Growth requires confrontation, not with others, but with yourself. You have to face the parts of you that seek validation like a drug. You have to question why you're so afraid of disappointing people who wouldn't lift a finger to understand you. You have to challenge the belief that being liked is more important than being respected. Because here's the truth. The more authentic you become, the fewer people will clap. But the ones who stay, they're your tribe. They're not clapping for the mask. They're clapping for the man underneath it. Setting boundaries is not cruelty. It's clarity. It's saying, this is who I am, this is what I stand for, and this is where I draw the line. It's not about pushing people away. It's about protecting your energy so you can give from overflow, not emptiness. The man who has boundaries commands respect without ever raising his voice. He doesn't explain his worth, he embodies it. And those who can't handle his standards are simply not meant to stay. That realization is liberating, not lonely, because every man must choose. Be accepted by the crowd and lose himself, or be rejected by many and finally meet who he really is. There is power in being misunderstood. There is strength in standing alone. When you stop bending for approval, you start walking in alignment. Your voice gets stronger, your decisions become clearer, your confidence grows, not from ego, but from integrity. You no longer need everyone to agree, because you're no longer seeking permission to live your life. You no longer need to be everything for everyone, because you finally decided to be everything you were made to be. That shift changes how you move. It changes how you speak. It changes who you allow into your space, and that space, it becomes sacred. Not everyone deserves access to it. The world will try to guilt you for not playing small, for not dimming your light, for not being nice, when nice really means passive. But nice men don't build empires. Nice men don't change lives. Nice men die with their dreams still inside them, because they were too afraid to upset the status quo. The man who chooses truth over comfort, mission over image, and purpose over popularity may be criticized, but he will be free, and freedom is the only soil in which greatness grows. You weren't born to blend in. You were born to lead, to challenge, to disrupt, to elevate. And that starts the day you stop apologizing for being different. Every man has to ask himself, am I being true to me, or am I performing for approval? Am I living a life of meaning, or am I chasing applause? Because when it's all said and done, no one claps at your funeral for how agreeable you were. They remember your strength, your truth, your courage to be real in a world addicted to pretending. You owe it to yourself to break the habit of pleasing, to stop negotiating with your values, to stop softening your truth to make fragile people feel safe. That's not leadership, that's surrender. And you weren't built to surrender to smallness. You were built to lead through authenticity. Most men live their entire lives waiting for the right moment. They think there will come a day when everything aligns perfectly. The motivation shows up, the fear disappears, the finances look better, and the world somehow grants them permission to finally begin. But that day never comes. Because life doesn't reward intentions, it rewards action. You don't get stronger by planning workouts, you get stronger by showing up in the gym when it's inconvenient, uncomfortable, and uninspiring. You don't grow by talking about your dreams, you grow by chasing them when the path is unclear and no one's cheering you on. Waiting is the enemy, and the sooner a man realizes that action is always the cure, the faster he stops playing small. The hard truth is that no one feels ready, not the greats, not the leaders, not the icons we admire. They weren't ready either, they just acted before they felt ready. That's what separates them. That's what built their legacy. They didn't wait until they had the full blueprint. They moved forward with what they had. They were willing to look foolish, to make mistakes, to fail publicly if needed. And in doing so, they learned, adapted, and grew faster than those who sat on the sidelines overthinking every detail. Perfectionism kills more dreams than failure ever will, because perfectionism is just fear in disguise. It sounds noble, but it's cowardice wrapped in productivity. Men are taught to analyze, strategize, calculate risks, and make the perfect move. But what they're rarely taught is how to act when the odds aren't in their favor, how to move when their knees are shaking, how to speak when their voice trembles. That's the training ground of real men. Not in the certainty of success, but in the chaos of risk. Every man has something in his heart he knows he's supposed to build, pursue, or change, but fear convinces him to wait. He tells himself he needs more time, more knowledge, more support. But what he really needs is courage. Not the absence of fear, but the decision that fear won't control the next step. Action is the only thing that creates clarity. You'll never think your way into a perfect life. You'll never journal your way into unshakable confidence. You'll never meditate your way into results. These things are tools, not the work itself. The work is doing the hard thing before you feel like doing it. The work is moving forward when the excuses are loud and the energy is low. The work is becoming the man who takes action, not just plans it. And here's the irony. Once you start, the motivation you were waiting for begins to show up. Action creates momentum. Momentum builds belief. And belief transforms men into machines that refuse to quit. The man who acts while others hesitate becomes the man others eventually follow. He doesn't have all the answers, but he's willing to find them. He doesn't avoid obstacles, he adapts to them. He doesn't seek approval, he earns respect, because while the rest of the world is busy waiting, he's busy becoming. That kind of man is rare because he's not moved by emotion, he's moved by vision. He knows who he wants to be and understands that every delay is a brick in the wall between him and that future. He knows time is not a renewable resource. Every hour spent waiting is an hour he'll never get back, and that urgency drives him. Taking action isn't always about big dramatic moves. Sometimes it's the small, consistent decisions that compound over time. Waking up early when the bed is warm. Speaking truth when silence would be easier. Saying no when compromise whispers sweet lies. These are the moments that shape a man's character. They're not glamorous, but they're powerful. Because in those moments, you're not just choosing discipline, you're proving to yourself that you can be trusted with your own potential. That's what builds self-respect, and self-respect is the foundation of all confidence. Fear will always try to convince you that today is not the day, that you need more certainty, more preparation, more reassurance. But fear is a liar. It's loud, convincing, and persistent, but it's not your advisor. Your job is not to eliminate fear. Your job is to move anyway, to make decisions when the future is unclear, to bet on yourself, even when the odds don't favor you. That's what creates breakthroughs. That's what makes average men exceptional. Because courage isn't loud speech, it's quiet, daily rebellion against comfort and procrastination. And the man who lives in action becomes unrecognizable to the man he once was. He doesn't just change his life, he changes everyone who watches him. Move with purpose in a world addicted to hesitation.